Welcome to another episode of the Age Diversity Network podcast that discusses all related issues for the older workers in the workplace and when job seeking or hiring. On this episode, we are joined by the fabulous Laura Harmsworth. Laura is a seasoned CV writer with a background in HR and has a master's degree in human resources management. Previously, she provided training and personnel for an NHS trust and was then an HR advisor for a telecoms company before moving into graduate recruitment for investment banks and law firms. And over the years, she has seen thousands of CVs. She set up Caversham CV Writing in 2012 and since then has helped hundreds of people with their CV, cover letters and LinkedIn profiles. Based in Reading but working with clients nationally, her client base ranges from undergraduates to senior executives across multiple industries. All CVs are personally tailored after a one-to-one consultation and are delivered with empathy and professionalism. Laura, thank you very much for joining the Age Diversity Network podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. I do try and get my guests to introduce themselves and talk about their journey from where they've come from, where they are now, the services they offer. And I noticed that you've had a previous career in HR and in recruitment, which has now led to you being a CV writer. And you've done that for many, many years. And I think with all of the CVs that you must have read over those years in your previous careers has given you a good grounding for what constitutes a good CV, what constitutes a bad CV, etc. So I think in terms of our listeners, it would be good just for you to start maybe going back to what you originally did, which led you to what you're doing now.
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. So my background is I did a degree in human geography and thought, what am I going to do? They said I can be a town planner or a teacher, and I didn't think my skill set actually lay there. So I did a master's in human resource management, and then that took me into my first role, which was in the NHS as the personnel and training officer. I then moved to Reading and got a job working for a telecoms company in HR, so supporting the business groups in their recruitment, in their daily HR activities. And then sadly, I spent 2 years doing redundancies there before I left. So then I had a career break to have our family, and then I went back into graduate recruitment, so quite a niche area of recruitment. But that did mean that I was seeing literally thousands of CVs over the years that I did that. So CVs, looking at them, scoring them, so looking at them in quite detail. And then I thought, actually, it's my experience in general recruitment as an HR advisor and then in graduate recruitment, I've seen some quite good CVs and I've seen some pretty bad CVs. And I thought, it's really obvious where people can change and really change their CVs and make them good and sell themselves more. So I thought, well, there must be a niche in the market. So I thought, well, I'm just going to try it. So I set up the CV writing company in 2012. And it's just gone from strength to strength.
I think CV writing, to me, it's there are a lot of people out there that purport to write CVs, and I think it's one of those things that people maybe feel that they can do well, but clearly, like everything, there's experts in different fields for different things. And I've over the years seen many different CVs, and I think what to me I find fascinating is what works, what doesn't work. And I think one of the interesting things is with a CV template, if that's what we want to call it, is it fair to say that there are different types of styles for different scenarios, or is there a sort of base template which people should focus on in terms of these are the things that you must do, this is how it needs to be structured, or can they vary depending on what type of role and industry they may be working in?
Yeah, there are no set rules to write your CV, but there are guidelines. And I mean, you could Google them and you'd come up with sort of the generic guidelines that you could use. I'd say the two, I mean, I don't know if I might come on to this later, but the screening software that most medium to large companies use mean you are quite restricted. So unless you're in a creative, going for a creative design type role, you have to keep your CV quite boring, I'd say. But it's quite a simple format to make it readable by the ATS, which is the applicant tracking software, and then by the person who's reading it. It's got to be pleasing to the eye and make it easy for them to read. In terms of structure, there are probably two main types of CV. So there's the chronological, which is the one we're all familiar with, and which is actually the most common and the one I tend to recommend, where you just go through everything in date order. But there is the functional or skills-based CV, which you can use if you're having quite a dramatic career change and you want to highlight your transferable skills over anything else. The only thing to be wary of that is that a lot of recruiters don't like that because they think you're trying to hide something, either a big career gap or a role that you don't want to talk about for some reason, which is why most people stick to the chronological CV. But the functional one definitely has its place, and I do write those.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, you know, it's interesting that I've heard so many different sort of tips and tricks from different people, like don't use italics, don't use pictures, particularly for ATS and what have you. ATS is definitely something which is always talked about by many people, and it's really a bugbearer for a lot of people because they put together what they believe to be a good CV. They put together what they believe to be containing all of the experience that they've had over the years that they've been working, only to find that they don't get to the next step because they haven't either crafted their CV or taken into consideration what ATS can or can't do. And that's a real big problem. I was speaking to somebody a few weeks ago, and they were saying that in terms of roles that they're applying for, they've had to rewrite their CV. Well, not necessarily rewrite it, but recraft it in such a way to try and get it through ATS. And that can be quite time consuming. So is it fair to say, though, that if you're applying for a particular role, that you would need to go back and revisit your CV for that role to try and, I wouldn't say cheat ATS, but at least get ATS to recognize what the role is asking for, so you can at least get past that situation, if you like, where a human may start looking at the CV? I mean, how does that bit really work?
No, absolutely. So there are certain things you can do for your CV as a base before you even start looking at tailoring it for specific roles. Things like making sure your CV, none of the information is in a table, because a lot of, and this is the tricky thing, a lot of the software is different. So you don't really know what the particular software is that a company is using, but you can go by some generic guidelines. Simple things like don't put any information in a table, no key information in the headers or the footers, no pictures, no graphics, no color. A font like Arial or Calibri is quite a good font. So that will get it through sort of the functional, the technical aspect of the ATS. Oh, and not a PDF either, because a lot of them can't read PDF. So a lot of people send PDF because the format doesn't get changed, but it does mean a lot of the software won't read any of the detail on your CV. And then it comes down to the keywords. So this is really important for ATS, but also subconsciously as a recruiter, you know what the type of skills and keywords you're looking for. So if you see them a lot on someone's CV for a particular role, you're going to think more favorably of that CV. So you literally just go through the job ad, if there's a job description attached to it, if there's a person specification, highlight all the keywords that they're looking for. And for the purposes of ATS and the human reading it, make sure they're littered throughout your CV, because you'll appear in higher search results within the ATS. It is time consuming, but it is worth it, because if you don't do it, your chances are really reduced for getting an interview for that role. So really highly recommend. I mean, if you're going for a similar type of role each time, the chances are the keywords are going to be pretty much the same anyway. It might just be tweaking it. And simple things like you might have interpersonal skills on your CV, but the job ad asks for communication skills. So it's just going through and changing interpersonal to communication. And it shouldn't really take much more than half an hour for each application, and really worth it.
I think one of the interesting things you said there, I have over the years sent my CV, and it has been PDF without really any thought. And the reason behind that is, as you've already said, I don't want anyone tinkering with my CV. My CV is my CV. So I'll send a PDF and no one can add words, take words out and what have you. But it's interesting that there are some ATS processes out there that just don't read them. So that's quite a good bit of feedback, because I think a lot of people still do PDFs for that reason. And I think also, getting back to what you said earlier, about the fonts and no tables, etc. I suppose it is difficult because people want their CV to look nice, but as you say, to actually get it through any automated system, it has to be a bit boring in the sense of it's just text based, because that's what the systems will read. And that's the age we live in, I guess. Gone are the days where you'd be delivering a CV through someone's post box. That's a long time ago. But obviously emails, etc., and online one-click applying and what have you. I think whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But the actual craft of writing a CV is difficult. So do you take someone's CV and just recraft it, or do you have sessions with people to work through their previous career and put something together for them? How does that work in your world?
So I offer a CV review where I just go through and highlight the key things that I think someone can change, and then they go away and change it. Or I do a complete full CV rewrite, which is the most popular service. And that's where I spend time talking to someone on Zoom. What used to be face-to-face if they were local and pre-COVID, but typically on Zoom, and go through all their experience, pull out all the achievements, because I couldn't put a percentage on it, but very high. People don't like to sell themselves on their CV. They don't want to come across as arrogant. They're a bit embarrassed about blowing their own trumpet, I guess. So a lot of that time I spend on the Zoom call is talking to people and saying, actually, that's a really good achievement. Why isn't it on your CV? Or they say, well, I didn't really do anything other than my job. But when we come down to it and chat about it, I can draw out lots of achievements that are relevant to the type of role they're applying to and get those on their CV. So we talk about that, and I write their CV for them, and then we work on it until they're 100% happy. And then be that if they're wanting to apply for a specific role, I'll make sure that CV is tailored to that role. If they haven't really got any specific roles in mind, I'll write more of a generic CV sort of aimed at the type of role they're looking at. And then I tell them how to tailor their CV for ready for when they see a specific role.
Okay. And I guess if you look at the process of people applying for roles, to a degree, I suppose you're the initial step, getting through the door, getting people noticed, and then after that it's down to them, or whether they've got someone who coaches them or mentors them to get them through the next step is obviously something different. So for the CV writing business, I think for me it is something that's very difficult. As I say, I've written many CVs. I've tried to craft them, tried to change them, and then I've read them back, and you can spend hours and hours and hours just going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, trying to work out how does this work best for me. With the one-to-one, obviously at the moment it's with the pandemic, but even pre-pandemic, I'm guessing that with video calling, that's been quite good for you in a way, has it? I suppose, because obviously in terms of the reach of your client base and the people that need that help, is it something that they can just pick up the phone and speak to you, or is it something that you set up sessions? For instance, do you sort of help them on interviewing techniques or anything like that, or is it just crafting the CV itself?
So if someone first contacts me, often through the website or through a recommendation, I'll have an initial chat with them just to discuss which service that I offer would be most appropriate for them, and then we'll set up a time and a date for the video call. And also I send out a form, so a bit of prep work, so we're not spending a lot of the time talking about certain things. I've got a lot of that information beforehand. Then once I've written the CV, I do have an interview guide. So I don't actually provide advice on interviews. I do have a guide. I have contacts of interview coaches if people feel they need that, where they can go through a mock interview and things. And the guide includes Zoom interviews as well. So quite up to date in terms of how to set it up, what to say, how to prepare, practice, pre-record, that sort of thing.
Okay. And do you think that people recognise that having a professionally written CV is quite key to them moving on, getting the roles that they want?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know about ATS and they don't know how to talk about themselves, how to sell themselves. And I think having someone else's perspective, so I can see what people have achieved and I can also see what can be cut from a CV. Because I'm guilty of this. I think everything that I've done in my career is really valuable and I want to tell everybody about everything that I've done. But obviously not all of it is relevant to roles that I might be applying to in the future. So if you have someone else that can help you, tell you, well, actually, this was brilliant, but it's not quite right for this role, then I think that's a really helpful thing to do. What I do advise people to have is to have a really long CV with absolutely everything they've ever done, every achievement, every job. And then when you're applying for a specific role, you can just pull across the relevant bits for that role.
Okay. Yeah, because I think there's differing advice out there. I think one of the hardest things is when you've done so much over your career is people are often worried that if they leave certain elements out, that might be quite key or important, and it's difficult to know what to leave in, what to take out, and a CV can be 6-7 pages long, you know, if it does include it all. And is there? I've heard different sort of bits of feedback. Is there a sort of, well, call it a standard, but is there advice that you would give to say that a CV probably needs to be 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages? Because we often hear different things from different people about how long a CV should be, and I guess it's all about capturing the hiring, if you get past the ATS piece, but capturing the hiring person's attention initially. So is there I wouldn't say a magic number, but is there a guide in terms of don't have it longer than X number of pages?
I would say 2 pages is the guidance, but if by sticking to 2 pages you're leaving something really critical out, going on to 3 isn't a deal breaker. I would say the key information needs to be on the first page, because as a recruiter, I would look at the first page, maybe only the first half of the page, the top half, and decide whether to read on or not. So if you've got a strong profile at the top under your personal details that really outlines what you can offer the company sort of in a nutshell, then another section with your top 6 to 8 key skills just bulleted, and then go into the more detail underneath in your career history. But I've seen people trying to really stick to 2 pages by decreasing the font to so small that you can't read it, or extending the white margins so you haven't got enough white space. And then as a human reading that, you don't know where to find all the information. So it's a balance between keeping it in a really nice, simple format, but also getting all the information across. So I would say 2 to 3 pages. Obviously an academic CV, something like that can be multiple. I've written one that was 15 pages just because of all the publications and references and things, but that's a completely different thing.
So in terms of the additional information, one of the things I wanted to ask you was that when someone's put their CV together, is there any harm of having an additional page or 2 with either references of some sort or feedback of some sort from, and I suppose where I'm leaning is that someone once suggested that once you've done your CV, and if you take LinkedIn as an example, is that you can then create another page which lists, say, the top 6 recommendations that people have given about you. I mean, is that good? Is that bad? Does it matter?
I'd say it's probably personal preference. I've never written a CV with that on. I recommend if people have got LinkedIn that they put the link at the top with their personal details, so people can then go and check you out and check out all your recommendations. I'd say to people not to put references on their CV because it just takes up space. And if we go back to the 2-page sort of recognised standard, as that's the sort of what people accept to read, I don't put references on because it's going to be assumed that you have them. So I would suggest keeping it for a later stage in the recruitment process with a link to your LinkedIn profile. But I can't see that there'd be any harm as having it as an additional page to the end of your document if you think it's really going to add weight to your CV. But I'd say a CV is sort of your advert, and then anything else on top of that comes later.
Okay. So if you had clearly, I'm talking from the Age Diversity Network point of view now. So if you've got an older worker who's either looking to get back into work, has taken a break, maybe bringing a family up, or has just taken a break for health reasons, or has found it difficult to find the job after their last job. So that they're in the marketplace, they're actually looking for work, and they've had a gap. One of the things that I've found with organizations, maybe it's not so bad now as it used to be, I don't know, but if you had a gap within your employment, it was sort of like, oh my goodness, you've been out of work for so long, have you really got what we need? So what advice would you give people in that situation that have had quite a bit of a career gap for whatever reason, and they're trying to get back into the market and sell themselves and apply for roles? Is there any specific way that they can approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a 5-year career gap. And I think nowadays it's much more common. It's almost expected because there's just so many people taking career breaks for personal reasons. They just want a break to go traveling or have a break or do, I don't know, a hobby or something for a while, to have a family, or if they've been made redundant. So I think it's a lot more accepted that people do have career breaks. It's not seen as a bad, awful thing now, but you do need to have it on your CV. You still can't have a gap on your CV because people will say, oh, they're in prison, or what your imagination starts from wild. Why is there a gap? You don't need to have a gap as long as you explain it on your CV. So on mine, I've just got the years where I had the gap and explain that I just in a one line saying that I was bringing up a family. But I did do some things during that time. So I was on a couple of committees. So I just added those in as well. And that's really important. If there's anything you do during that gap, any training, any research, any voluntary work, anything, if you set up your own business, just to show that you were still doing something, then that's worth putting on your CV. And also in that respect, I do recommend, it depends how long ago it was, but for mine, it was over 10 years ago. So for anything in the last of 10 years, I put the dates on. Then under the career history, I then have early career, and then just have all your jobs that you did, but not with the dates on, because it was 10 years ago. People don't need to know the dates. And also you don't need to put months on your CV unless you're a freelancer maybe and you just want to show the different sort of jobs that you did, but just stick to the years. But the main thing is gaps are fine. Just explain them. Make sure you don't exclude them from your CV.
And I suppose it also depends on the area maybe that you're working in. If you're still looking to pursue a career in the previous career you had a long gap, then for sure there may be some training element and bringing up to speed to do. If you're looking for a completely different career, or are open to a different career, I guess the thing to bring out is probably the soft skills, the transferable skills, that sort of thing, which is something that is very difficult, I think. But I'm not a CV writer, you are. But it's something I think is difficult to bring out on a CV, the transferable skills, because often if someone is looking to either change the type of role that they're doing or even the industry, but the skills that they have are quite transferable, it's people won't necessarily see that, or the ATS system wouldn't. And how would you actually get that across? Because I think you can be very specific about technical skills or things that you've actually done, but the softer side of things is a real hard sell, because I think unless someone is talking to you personally, they don't get to know you. They can't get to ask those questions, get the examples, which you won't have on your CV because your CV is shorter. And I think that's a really difficult thing to get across. I mean, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think the job advert, the person spec are your friend in that respect, because you can really look what they're looking for, look at the transferable skills, and then find examples from your career history that match those, and make sure they're really evident in the profile and the key skills section. And also use your cover letter to put them into context. So explain that you got these transferable skills, where you got them, and how they match the job that you're applying to. If you've got a career gap and you're wanting to get into a different type of career, but you haven't seen a role that particularly appeals to you yet, look for about 5 to 10 adverts that you think you might apply to, go through all of those, and that's a good way of finding all the skills, the transferable skills, the soft skills that they're looking for. Then you can go back and think, right, where have I got evidence of this? And they're the things you need to include in your CV. And also worth reaching out to people in LinkedIn in the type of companies that you're wanting to apply to, and looking at their profiles and the type of skills that they've got, because you've got all the key skills at the bottom.
Okay, that's good advice. So for an older worker, one of the things that I was keen to ask you is, are there any particular things that they should do and things that they shouldn't do with their CV? And I know these days people don't put their age down, and that's fine. And I suppose you've already mentioned that don't literally put down all the dates of the previous roles, because that will show your age anyway. And I'm not saying that all hiring people are discriminating against age, but we know it's out there, unfortunately. But what advice would you give to an older worker who is trying to put together a CV, the do's and the don'ts, the basic do's and don'ts, if you like?
Yeah, so like you said, I mean, I recommend to anybody not to put their date of birth on their CV. You don't need it, and it doesn't add anything, so don't. But I see so many people with their date of birth on, so take that off. Ensure your CV looks quite modern, so use a modern font, so Times New Roman. So don't use things like that. Calibri or Arial are the best ones, because they look modern and they'll get through the ATS. In terms of, you can really sort of age proof your CV by not saying at the profile at the top, over 25 years experience in, and then whatever your industry or experience is. You could just change the terminology to things like extensive experience in. And then again, pulling out just the relevant skills, the relevant experience. So you're not detailing every single job you had right back to your school days, just putting in the real relevant ones. And again, keeping to that sort of approximately 10-year rule. So anything before 10 years, put in an early career and take out the dates, because you don't need the dates then. And again, I wouldn't put in anything in your education unless it's particularly asked for. So if it asks for a degree and you've got a degree, put your degree in. But again, you don't need to put the date in that. Make sure you do include any up-to-date training to make sure, and qualifications. So it shows that you're willing to learn, you're happy to learn, you're willing to keep up to date with any technology or more soft skill training. And there's lots of, if you are on a gap at the moment, there's lots of free things you can do to make sure you have got that up-to-date information on your CV. And if you sign up to LinkedIn Premium, you get a 30-day free trial, and then I think it's £25 a month after that. But that gives you access to LinkedIn Learning, which has got thousands of courses on there, and then you can add those to your profile as well as your CV. And just then little things like your email address. If you have, actually, I've got a Hotmail for my personal one, but try and make it more, try and get a Gmail address. Just you could just set up, I often recommend setting up a Gmail email just for the purpose of job hunting. So you've got one email that's dedicated for all your applications, and it just makes it look a bit more up to date having a Gmail address. But yeah, they're the key things I would suggest. And there are other things aside from your CV that you can do. Do you want me to run through those quickly?
Yes, please. That'd be great. Yes, thank you.
So you can do a bit of research. So if you're interested in a particular company, you can look at their diversity inclusion record, if they've got one of those, and see if they're open to having a diverse workforce, and then maybe check out that company on LinkedIn to see actually if the workforce members that work for that company are diverse, to see if they're really living up to their reputation. And also over the course of your career, your personal life, you'd have built up a massive network that people who are just starting out in their roles, in their careers, won't have. Really tap into that, even if you barely know someone, or they're a contact of a contact, or you haven't spoken for 20 years, reaching out to them, engaging with them, saying you're looking for work. If they happen to hear of anything in the particular area that you're looking for, just to let them know. And being on LinkedIn for that reason also shows that you're sort of technically savvy, and you can, you know, engage and put articles and share things on there. I can't reiterate how much LinkedIn is such a good tool for anyone in their job search. And then, as I said, training and learning. So getting up to date with skills, technical skills, soft skills, just to show that you're willing to learn, and making sure you've got those on your CV. And then your cover letter as well. So I always say, whether they ask for a cover letter or not, always include it, just a page, because it just, you can be a bit more personal, a bit less formal in that, and explain your situation, really reiterate your transferable skills, and anything that you can offer to that new company.
I think cover letters, I think, yes, I agree with you. They can be quite good, specifically if someone is targeting a particular role, and they can maybe just expand a little bit on their experience, their skills, their knowledge, their transferable skills, which wouldn't necessarily come out within the CV per se. But I think getting back to LinkedIn, definitely, if you are a premium member, there's loads of stuff. I'm a premium member, and I've looked at some of their stuff, and I actually have taken some of the courses because I find some of them quite interesting. I think one of the downsides for me personally on LinkedIn is, and I get why they do it, organizations, but it's the apply now button in terms of jobs. It doesn't really give you the opportunity to send that personal message in terms of a cover letter, and that's where you really have to have the CV right, I guess. So if people are applying for roles which is literally just going to take an uploaded document, their CV, that has to be right. So I think the cover letter is fantastic, but there are times when you don't get the opportunity to include that, because once you hit the apply now button, it's attach your CV and it's gone. It's somewhere out there, and an organization, whether the ATS system or whether a personal recruiter is going to be looking at that CV, who knows. But I think for applying, definitely, if there's an opportunity to add something that tells the recruiter or the organization a bit more about why you want to apply for the role, is definitely a good piece of advice. And I think it is something that people should be doing if they get that opportunity.
Yeah, and if there's not that opportunity, you could find who the recruiter is for that role on LinkedIn and send them an email or something. Or quite often they'll be advertising directly on their website anyway, as well as on LinkedIn. So you can then apply through the company directly, and that might give you a bit more opportunity. But if there is absolutely no way of doing it, then yes, you've got to make sure your profile at the top, which for me takes the longest and is the hardest bit to write, and I write at the end, that's got to be really strong.
Okay, no, that's sound advice. Thank you for that. With what you do, it's always very difficult, because one of the things I do ask people who come onto the podcast is a direct question, and you may or may not be able to answer it, which is effectively, what would you say is not the biggest achievement, but in terms of what you do throughout your career, and that could be prior to CV writing, it could be during HR, is there a moment that you thought, yeah, I really have achieved something great here? Or do you get that because obviously you've been doing what you're doing now for nearly 10 years? Is there something where you can put your cap on and say, that person that came to me I really managed to help them? Or is there another moment in your life that you can say, yeah, that was my biggest achievement and I'm really proud of that?
I think so. Actually, something I do is at the end of every month, I go back and write everything I've achieved for that month, which actually I recommend anybody do if they're looking, just if you're looking for a job or not, because quite often I get bogged down in just the day-to-day things. And then I think, oh, I don't think I've really achieved much this month. And then when I look back, I go, oh, actually I have. But they're all the little things, small things. I don't know. I think setting up the company is probably my biggest achievement. And when was it? 2012. So next year will be my 10-year anniversary. And I realized that this year. And I thought, oh, next year will be 10 years of this company. And I think that is my massive achievement, because it was quite easy working for a corporation. I mean, obviously it was a hard job, but this was a whole different ball game, setting up my own company. But I'm proud of it because it's mine and I do it, and I hear success stories. I know I'm really helping people. When I get an email a month or so later saying, I've got so many interviews, or I've got the job that I really wanted, that to me gives me such a great sense of achievement that I've helped someone. And also that it's something that I can fit around the family. That was always my key thing, that I wanted to use my skills the best way I could, but also the children came first and I needed that flexibility. So, and I really think there were some years I didn't achieve that. There were some years where I worked way too many hours, was so stressed about it all. So it's taken a while to get that balance, but now I'm reaching that 10 years. I think, yes, I've really achieved it and I'm really proud of it. But yeah, it took quite a lot of work, and I took guidance from people. I had a coach, and I think using people who are experts in an area is just so important, because that coach really guided me through how to set up a business. And I wouldn't be the company wouldn't be where it is today without her help.
So I guess that one of the nice things about what you do, you've already mentioned it, is you can put together a CV for someone to help them, obviously, start applying for the roles they want to apply for, but it's a success story. So yes, we all do what we do for a living. We get paid for what we do, but it's nice to say what I did actually helped someone. It changed their lives. It made a difference. That must be a huge satisfaction for you. You've already mentioned it is. So I could imagine that that's something that you do get out of the work you do right now.
Yeah, massive satisfaction. And it wasn't me that got them their job. Ultimately, that person has got the skills and the abilities. And my role is right at the beginning. It's just getting their advert out there for them to get the interview. So once they're at the interview, then it's up to them, and they do really well. You know, a lot of people say, I'm really good at interview. I just can't get myself to that interview. So that's the key thing, is getting them to interview. But staying in touch with people and hearing that they've got interviews and then they've got a job that they're really enjoying is brilliant. I can't think of anything better, really.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I think in terms of what you're actually offering, if people wanted to find out more, what's the best way for people to contact you? You've clearly got a presence on LinkedIn, and you've got your website. So how would you recommend that people reach out to you to sort of have a chat initially if they want to follow up on this service that you offer?
Yeah, so I suggest look at my website, and I have people they can either email me or give me a call on the telephone. Do you want me to give both those details
Yeah,
out
if you
now?
could give me the website address, email address, etc., that would be great. Then what we'll do is we'll make sure that for the listeners they've got it, and certainly on the podcast, the video version, we'll be putting it at the top of the screen. So that would be great.
Yeah, so the website is Caversham CV Writing, all one word, .co.uk, and the email is contact@cavershamcvwriting.co.uk. And if you just type in on LinkedIn, I'm Laura Harmsworth, and then I'll have my picture up there, so you'll recognise me from here on there, hopefully.
I'm sure we will. So the website is caversham.cvwriting.co.uk.
Yeah, so Caversham is where I live. It's out on the suburb of Reading, so it's Caversham.
Right. No, that's fantastic. And LinkedIn is always, as you say, a good place to start for people to reach out, either send an email, look at your stuff, or try and connect with you, whatever the reason may be. But that's fantastic.
Yeah, and on LinkedIn, in my featured section at the top, I've got a checklist on there, so it tells people they can download it or look at it on the website, on sort of do's and don'ts, the key things. It's 2 pages, so you can just check off, go through your CV and check that you've got all those items on there.
No, that's fantastic. So if they go onto LinkedIn, they can download something that will at least give them the initial checklist to see what they've done is good enough, and at least to compare that with the CV they currently have. But if they feel that they need to go that step further, then obviously reach out to you via your website or via LinkedIn. And I think then hopefully, I'm sure that you'll be helping a lot more people, and I think it's great that we've had this conversation, because CV writing is so tough. I can honestly say that I've probably written 20 different versions of my CV over the years, and if I picked up my CV and looked at it now, I'm probably still not happy with it, and I'd want to change it again. And it's quite nice to dare I say, outsource it. It's not really outsourcing, it's collaboration, I guess. But it's nice to sort of give that headache to somebody else to sort out for you. So I think it's definitely a good service to be running, and hopefully something that the Age Diversity Network followers and listeners will find of use. So thank you for that.
No, thank you for asking me on.
No, well, I think that's great, and I think thank you for your time. Let's hope that all of the listeners do gain something out of this, and let's hope that we have a chat sometime in the future.
Yep, that'd be great. Thank you.
No, well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.
If you are affected by age diversity issues at work, or are experiencing problems seeking employment and believe that your age is a barrier, or if you are an inclusive employer who actively embraces the older worker and are interested in the services and help we can offer, then please contact us at www.agediversitynetwork.com or simply follow us on LinkedIn.